Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast. I'm Bella, and today in our 193rd episode, we're diving into something that could literally transform your dairy operations' bottom line. We're talking about revolutionary calf rearing strategies that are delivering incredible returns on investment.
And I'm Douglas, joining Bella today to break down these game-changing approaches. I've seen a lot of so-called innovations come and go, but what we're discussing today is backed by solid research and real-world results. We'll be covering 5 specific strategies that progressive dairies are implementing right now with remarkable success.
So Douglas, is it true these strategies can deliver over $4 back for every dollar invested? That sounds almost too good to be true.
It does sound that way, Bella, but the numbers don't lie. Let's dive into why these approaches work and how our listeners can start implementing them on their own operations.
Before we get into the specific strategies, Douglas, I think many of our listeners might be wondering why they haven't heard about these approaches before. If they're so effective, why aren't more dairy farms implementing them?
That's an excellent question, Bella. The truth is we've all been leaving money on the table for years. Most of us have simply accepted that calf rearing comes with certain inevitable challenges. Mediocre growth rates, scours outbreaks, all those headaches we've just considered normal.
So it's really about challenging our assumptions.
Exactly. The research shows that the first 60 days of a calf's life represents the highest return investment opportunity on your entire operation. Yet we often treat it like a necessary evil rather than the gold mine it actually is.
Interested. What kind of returns are we talking about specifically?
The dairy farms that have embraced these strategies are reporting 12% higher milk yields from their first lactation heifers. They're spending 28% less on antibiotics, and their replacement heifers are hitting breeding weight more than 3 weeks earlier than conventionally raised animals.
Those are significant numbers.
They absolutely are. And what's particularly interesting is that fewer than 15% of U.S. dairies have fully adopted these practices. That means there's a huge competitive advantage waiting for forward-thinking producers. You know, Bella, I remember when individual hutches became the gold standard. I used to preach their benefits myself. We all thought isolation was the key to disease control.
But the research is showing something different now.
Completely different. When calves are housed in pairs from their first 2 weeks of life, they consume 18% more starter feed by weaning time, Johnson and Lee, 2024. They reach their target weights a full week earlier, and perhaps most surprisingly, cross-sucking behaviors drop by about 40%.
Caller? But I can already hear our listeners thinking, won't disease spread more easily if calves are housed together? That's the main reason we went to individual housing in the first place, right?
That's the exact concern I had too, Bella. But when managed properly, the research shows pair-housed calves don't have significantly higher disease rates. The key phrase there is when managed properly. Yes, you'll spend about 15 to 20% more time on cleaning, but the benefits far outweigh that extra effort.
Is there science behind why this works so well?
There absolutely is. Dr. Liam O'Connor from Tufts University explains that social interaction triggers neural pathways that stimulate curiosity about novel feeds. O'Connor, 2023. In simpler terms, calves learn from watching their buddies. When one calf explores starter feed, the other one thinks, hey, maybe I should try that too.
So, how would a farmer start implementing pair housing? Let's get into the nitty-gritty details.
For space requirements, research shows each calf in a pair needs about 35 square feet. That's slightly less than twice what you'd provide individually, so there's an efficiency gain there. You'll need 2 nipples per pen, positioned at least 24 inches apart to prevent competition.
What about the physical setup?
Start by selecting pairs carefully. Similar age and size is ideal, with no more than 5 days difference in age. Make sure your bedding is deep and dry. At least 6 inches of straw is recommended. And here's a practical tip from Silver Spring Dairy in Wisconsin. Use a simple divider during milk feeding times for the first week to ensure both calves get their full ration, then remove it as they adjust to eating together.
Are there any farms who've seen particularly good results?
James Peterson from Meadowview Dairy in Minnesota last month. They've been pair housing for about 3 years now. James told me, "We were skeptical at first, especially about disease transmission, but our treatment rates have actually dropped by 32% since implementing pair housing. The calves are more active, more curious, and just seem happier. That translates to better starter intake and stronger growth curves. We'd never go back to individual pens now." I'll be the first to admit it, Bella. I used to think once we got that first hour colostrum feeding right, we could check that box and move on. Boy, was I wrong.
What does the research show about extending colostrum feeding?
The industry has been leaving serious money on the table by stopping colostrum feeding after day 1. While nearly all of us nail that critical first feeding, and we should pat ourselves on the back for that, progressive dairies are now extending colostrum benefits well beyond those first 24 hours.
How exactly do they do that?
You've got several options. You can feed transition milk, that's from the 2nd through 8th milkings after calving, or you can add some first milking colostrum to milk replacer for up to 2 weeks. Some operations are also using carefully selected colostrum replacers as supplements.
Why does extending colostrum feeding work so well?
Colostrum isn't just about those immunoglobulins we've all heard about. It's packed with antibodies, oligosaccharides, growth factors, microRNAs, and lactoferrin. These compounds keep providing local gut protection even after that absorption window for systemic immunity closes.
So, even though the calf can't absorb the antibodies into its bloodstream after that first day, there are still benefits.
Exactly. My veterinarian friend Gemma Reed puts it perfectly. It's like installing a 24/7 security system in their digestive tracts that keeps working day after day.
Are there studies backing this up?
Absolutely. A 2023 study by Miller and colleagues found that extended colostrum feeding cut diarrhea duration by 2.3 days. Miller et al., 2023. Think about what that means. Less labor, fewer treatments, and calves that stay on their growth curve instead of hitting a slump.
Yaris, I've heard about something called the triple threat protocol. Can you explain that?
That's one of my favorite approaches. The triple threat protocol involves feeding pooled high IgG colostrum. That's colostrum with at least 50 milligrams per milliliter of immunoglobulins at 5% of body weight for 3 days straight. Farms implementing this protocol are seeing calves gain an extra 15 pounds by 6 months of age.
But what about disease transmission risks when you're pooling colostrum?
That's the elephant in the room, Bella. If you're pooling colostrum, you've got legitimate concerns about Johne's disease, mycoplasma, and salmonella. But there are ways to mitigate those risks.
Can you share the specific pasteurization protocol?
The research-backed protocol is 60 degrees Celsius for 60 minutes. This time-temperature combination is critical. It's sufficient to kill pathogens without degrading the beneficial immunoglobulins and bioactive compounds. If you're using a commercial pasteurizer, make sure it maintains this specific temperature consistently. Don't use the same pasteurization protocol as for waste milk, which is typically higher temperature for a shorter time. That would damage the colostrum's beneficial components.
Do you have any real-world examples of farms using extended colostrum feeding?
Oak Ridge Dairy in Connecticut implemented extended colostrum feeding 2 years ago. Their herd manager, Sarah Chen, told me, "We add 10% high-quality colostrum to our milk replacer for the first 10 days of life. It requires some logistical planning. We test all colostrum with a Brix refractometer and only pool colostrum measuring above 24%. But the results have been remarkable. Our pre-weaning mortality has dropped from 8% to under 3%, and our treatment rates for scours are down by 41%. Oh boy, if there's one area where traditional dairy practice completely ignores biology, it's weaning. Think about it. We yank the milk away overnight and then wonder why our calves get sick and stop growing.
What happens physiologically when we wean abruptly?
When we abruptly remove milk, we trigger a massive stress response. Cortisol, that's the stress hormone, stays elevated for 72 plus hours, effectively suppressing the immune system right when calves need it most. Davis et al., 2024.
And are there studies showing better approaches?
The UC Davis weaning study from 2024 shows some eye-opening numbers. With conventional weaning, calves gained about 1.8 pounds daily, with 34% getting sick after weaning. With nose flaps, those numbers improved to 2.1 pounds daily gain and only 18% illness. And with part-time separation, we're talking 2.3 pounds daily gain and just 12% post-weaning illness.
That's a dramatic difference. What exactly are these alternative approaches?
The approach getting the best results divides weaning into two distinct phases. First, prevent nursing while keeping calves with their social group. Then, complete separation only after they've adjusted to the nutritional change.
And nose flaps, how do those work?
They're surprisingly effective. These simple plastic devices prevent nursing but allow normal eating and drinking. Calves stay with their mothers while learning to eat more solid feed, eliminating the double whammy stress of nutritional and social changes happening all at once.
I've also heard about some high-tech approaches using smart collars.
Yes, some tech-savvy operations are using solar-powered smart collars that monitor nursing duration. When the collar shows a calf naturally reducing nursing, that's the perfect time to wean. No guesswork, just following the calf's biological timeline.
I believe Dr. Maria Chen explained it as respecting each calf's individual development rather than imposing arbitrary weaning dates.
Exactly right. We're letting the calf's behavior tell us when they're ready instead of forcing our schedule on them.
Can you share a detailed step-down protocol that farmers could implement tomorrow?
Here's a research-backed protocol that's shown excellent results. If you're feeding 8 liters of milk or milk replacer daily, reduce to 6 liters for 5 days while monitoring starter intake. Then reduce to 4 liters for another 5 days, but only if the calf is consistently consuming at least 1.5 pounds of starter daily. Finally, reduce to 2 liters for 3 days before complete removal. Each step should only proceed if the calf is meeting solid feed intake targets.
Any real-world success stories with these approaches?
Hillcrest Dairy in Pennsylvania implemented a version of this step-down protocol last year. Owner Mark Roberts told me, "We used to see about a 30% dip in growth rate during the 2 weeks after weaning. With our new approach, that dip is down to less than 10%, and our treatment rates for respiratory disease post-weaning have dropped by 60%. Yes, it takes more management and attention to detail, but the payoff in healthier, faster-growing calves has been well worth it." This one really surprised me too, Bella. For years, I've been setting aside my very best hay for the calves. Turns out, I was doing it all wrong.
Really? What does the research show?
Research from the Tri-State Calf Consortium shows that moderate quality hay with about 50% NDF, that's neutral detergent fiber, produces significantly better results than premium alfalfa hay. We're talking about final weights of 612 pounds versus 582 pounds with the fancy alfalfa.
That's a 30-pound difference. Why would lesser quality hay work better?
There's a Goldilocks zone where roughage is just challenging enough to stimulate optimal rumen development without overwhelming an immature digestive system. That moderate quality hay offered from day 10 of life triggers a 27% surge in butyrate production, which is critical for rumen development. Garcia et al., 2023.
So those beautiful leafy alfalfa bales?
They're actually too easily digestible. They don't provide the ruminal workout needed for optimal papillae development. It's like giving a weightlifter feathers instead of dumbbells.
Are there other benefits beyond rumen development?
Absolutely. Strategic hay offering reduces non-nutritive sucking behaviors by 61%. Plus, farms are reporting about 14% savings on milk replacer costs as calves transition more effectively to solid feeds.
How should farmers implement this approach? Timing, presentation, quantity?
Start offering hay around day 10 of life, much earlier than conventional wisdom suggests. Use grass hay with approximately 50% NDF. Presentation is key. Hanging hay nets are particularly effective because they extend consumption time and build neck muscles. Start with small amounts, about a quarter pound per calf daily, and increase gradually. By weaning, calves should have free access to hay, typically consuming 1 to 1.5 pounds daily.
Any creative approaches you've seen on farms?
Riverside Dairy in Wisconsin uses what they call the hay bale playground approach. They secure a small square bale in the corner of the pen using a hay net, allowing calves to pull hay from all sides. Their calf manager, Tom Wilson, told me, "We've turned hay into an enrichment activity as much as a feed source. The calves spend hours interacting with the bale, pulling, chewing, and playing. We've seen dramatic improvements in rumination behavior, and interestingly, our grain consumption has increased too, not decreased, since implementing this method." I used to think disease prevention meant vaccines and clean pens. Those matter, of course, but I've discovered nutrition plays an even bigger role in building robust immunity.
What specific nutritional strategies help boost immunity?
There are several approaches that can dramatically enhance natural immune function while limiting antibiotic use. And yes, there are measurable economic benefits too.
Let's start with probiotics. I know there are so many products on the market. Are some better than others?
Not all probiotics are created equal, not even close. Research has identified specific strains that deliver remarkable results. Take Saccharomyces cerevisiae CNCM E193, a yeast strain that cuts scour rates by 44%, Kumar et al. 2024.
How does it work?
Through multiple mechanisms. It crowds out harmful bacteria, that's called competitive exclusion. It strengthens the gut barrier function, and it helps modulate immune responses. What makes financial sense is that implementation costs are actually lower than typical antibiotic treatments, with better prevention outcomes.
Interested, you've also mentioned zinc supplementation as an immunity booster.
Another tool in your arsenal. Research shows that zinc proteinate supplementation delivering 80 milligrams per day significantly improves growth and immune function while reducing diarrhea incidence.
How do you recommend providing it?
I love the free choice zinc oxide blocks. Calves instinctively self-dose according to their needs, giving themselves effective protection during challenges without requiring you to precisely measure anything.
For farmers ready to enhance their calves' natural immune function, what specific implementation protocol would you recommend?
Start with selecting a research-backed probiotic. Look specifically for Saccharomyces cerevisiae, CNCM E193, or similar documented strains. The effective dosage is 1 gram per day, mixed directly into milk or milk replacer. For zinc supplementation, either add zinc proteinate at 80 milligrams per day to grain starter or provide free choice zinc oxide blocks. The key is consistency. Start these protocols at birth and maintain them straight through weaning.
Do you have a real-world example of a farm that's implemented these immunity-boosting protocols?
Meadowcrest Farm in Vermont has been implementing a comprehensive immunity-boosting nutrition program for the past 18 months. Their herd veterinarian, Dr. Jessica Morgan, shared some impressive numbers with me. We've reduced our antibiotic usage for pre-weaned calves by 64% while improving daily gain by 0.2 pounds per day. The most dramatic improvement has been in respiratory illness rates, which have dropped from 23% of calves requiring treatment to just 8%. The investment in these nutritional strategies pays for itself many times over in reduced treatment costs alone, not even counting the growth benefits. Let's talk money, because at the end of the day, that's what keeps the lights on.
What's the typical investment required to implement these strategies, and what's the detailed return?
Implementing comprehensive calf nutrition and housing improvements costs about $127 per calf. That breaks down to approximately $50 for enhanced nutrition, $45 for housing modifications, and $32 for immunity-boosting supplements and protocols. That's not chump change, but let me break down the returns in detail.
Interested, please do.
Let's compare conventional operations versus those using advanced protocols. First, there's that initial investment of $127, but treatment costs drop from $182 per calf down to just $38. That's a savings of $144 right there. First lactation value increases by about 12% in milk yield, which translates to around $285, and you're culling 23% fewer animals, saving another $175 in replacement costs.
So that's a net economic impact of
$477 per animal, and operations typically recoup their investment within 18 months through reduced vet bills, higher milk production, and fewer replacements needed. Patel and Smith, 2024. After that, it's all profit flowing straight to your bottom line.
You mentioned male calves earlier. Most dairy operations view them as an unavoidable cost center.
That's another opportunity. Instead of viewing them as a necessary evil, forward-thinking farms are applying these same strategies to transform them into genuine profit centers. Dairy beef crossbreeding programs using Angus sires produce calves worth $150 more at market. They also finish about 22 days faster than pure dairy breeds. Absolutely. Consumer trends are creating even more economic potential. Market research shows substantial premiums for production practices that align with consumer values. 28% for extended nursing protocols, 34% for antibiotic-free production, and 41% for grass-fed approaches. USDA 2024.
As economist Dr. Raj Patel puts it, modern consumers don't buy milk, they buy stories. Your calves' welfare is your best marketing script.
Let me share a concrete example. Clover Hill Farm in Wisconsin reported an 18% overall profit increase after adopting these advanced calf strategies. Their owner, Maria Schmidt, explained their approach. "We didn't just improve our calf program, we marketed it. We developed relationships with specialty cheesemakers who were looking for milk with a welfare story. We're now getting a 12% premium for our milk because we can document our advanced calf welfare protocols." The initial investment in changing our calf program has paid off multiple times over through both direct benefits and marketing advantages. You don't have to flip your entire operation upside down overnight.
What's the best first step?
For most farms I work with, beginning with a single strategic change before expanding works best. Initial improvements in colostrum management or pair housing typically generate visible benefits that build confidence for further changes.
Any specific success stories?
I recently worked with a 200-cow operation in Pennsylvania that started super simple, just adding first milking colostrum at 10% by volume to their milk replacer for the first 5 days. Within 3 weeks, they noticed visibly improved fecal consistency and reduced treatment rates. That early win gave them the confidence to gradually implement additional changes.
What about farms with resource constraints? Is there a timeline you'd recommend?
I suggest a 90-day implementation plan. Month 1 is assessment. Benchmark your current metrics and identify your priority area. Month 2 is implementing your first protocol. Put one strategic change in place and document challenges. Month 3 is evaluation. Compare performance to your baseline and calculate your initial ROI. Then months 4 through 6 are about expansion, adding a second protocol based on the success of your first.
What about farms with resource constraints?
Solution-oriented. You're not alone there. Consider collaborative models where you partner with neighboring operations. Some innovative farmers are forming strategic partnerships with profit-sharing agreements and shared technology investments.
Any examples of that?
I saw a cooperative model in central Wisconsin that brings together 5 farms totaling 1,800 cows. Their calves are raised at a dedicated facility implementing these advanced protocols. The facility manager, John Peterson, explained their approach. Each farm contributes based on the number of calves they send to the facility. We've pooled resources to invest in automated feeders, monitoring systems, and specialized staff training. The calves return to their home farms after weaning, but the shared facility allows for economies of scale and expertise that would be cost prohibitive for any individual farm. Our average daily gain is now running 0.2 pounds higher than the state average, and our mortality rates are 60% lower than the national average.
Staff training must be an important component of successful implementation.
Absolutely critical. Your team needs to understand not just what to do, but why it matters. Comprehensive training should cover calf development benchmarks, behavior observation, and early intervention techniques. Cedar Ridge Dairy in Michigan implemented Calf Champion certifications for their staff, a structured training program that ensures everyone understands the science behind these protocols. Their turnover rate among calf care staff has dropped by 40% since implementing this program, which has further improved their calf outcomes through better consistency in care.
We've covered so much ground today, from pair housing to extended colostrum feeding, stress-free weaning to the hay paradox, and immunity-boosting nutrition, all strategies that deliver that impressive $4.20 return for every dollar invested. Douglas, any final thoughts for our listeners?
The revolution in calf rearing isn't coming someday. It's happening right now. Progressive operations implementing these evidence-based approaches are building advantages that will compound over time. The documented return of $4.20 for every dollar invested makes a pretty compelling case for prioritizing these improvements.
So what's the very first thing our listeners should do after finishing this podcast?
Pick just one strategy: pair housing, extended colostrum feeding, or strategic hay introduction. Try it with a subset of calves and measure results obsessively. Calculate your specific ROI and use this data to guide expansion. Every dairy farm faces unique challenges in implementing these approaches, but the fundamental principles apply universally.
The choice seems clear. Either embrace these advancements and capitalize on their benefits, or watch as competitors gain increasingly unmatchable advantages in animal performance and market positioning. Your herd's future potential is literally being programmed today in your calf barn.
What story do you want your decisions to tell?
Healing. That's all for this episode of the Bullvine Podcast. We'd love to hear about your experiences implementing any of these strategies. Drop us a line at feedback@thebullvine.com or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Bella.
And I'm Douglas. Thanks for listening.